Rose Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she cleaned another marble floor in the Morgan mansion. At 42, she had spent the last 15 years working as a maid for some of the richest families in town. But working for James Morgan was different. He was the kind of rich man who thought money could buy anything, even the right to humiliate people. "Martinez," James's voice boomed through the hallway. "My office now." Rose set down her cleaning supplies and hurried to his office, her practical shoes squeaking against the floor she had just polished. She found him sitting behind his massive desk, wearing one of his expensive suits that probably cost more than she made in a year. "Yes, Mr. Morgan?" she asked, standing straight despite her tired back. James looked at her with that smirk she had come to hate over the past year. "There's a charity gala this weekend, very exclusive. The most important people in town will be there." Rose nodded, already thinking about the extra hours she'd have to work to prepare the house for his pre-party activities. "I want you to attend," he said, his smirk growing wider. Rose blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "As my guest," he added, clearly enjoying her confusion. "Wear something nice, though I imagine that might be difficult with what I pay you." He laughed at his own joke. Rose felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She knew exactly what this was, another one of his games to show off his power. He had done similar things before, like making her serve coffee to his business partners while telling them about her failed marriage and financial struggles. "I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Morgan," she said quietly. "It wasn't a request," James replied, his voice turning cold. "Either you come to the gala or you can find another job, and good luck finding one that pays as well as I do, especially at your age." Rose thought about her daughter Amy in college, about the tuition payments she still had to make, about the small apartment she could barely afford. She couldn't lose this job, no matter how much she hated it. "What time should I arrive?" she asked, swallowing her pride. James grinned. "That's more like it. 8 o'clock sharp. Don't embarrass me." Rose left his office with her hands shaking. In the kitchen, her friend Maria, the cook, took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "What did that devil want now?" Maria asked, pulling out a chair for Rose. Rose told her about the gala invitation and James's thinly veiled threats. Maria's face grew darker with each word. "He's going to parade you around like some kind of trophy," Maria said angrily, "to show everyone how generous he is to his help." "I know," Rose whispered, "but I need this job." "Maybe you won't have to go alone," a deep voice said from the doorway. Both women turned to see Michael Morgan, James's younger brother, standing there. Unlike James, Michael had always treated the staff with kindness and respect. He was just as wealthy as his brother, but didn't feel the need to remind everyone about it every 5 minutes. "I couldn't help but overhear," Michael said, walking into the kitchen. "My brother has gone too far this time." Rose shook her head. "Mr. Michael, please don't get involved. I'll be fine." Michael sat down at the kitchen table, something James would never do. "Rose, you've worked here for years. I've seen how James treats you, how he treats everyone he thinks is beneath him. Let me help." "How?" Maria asked. Michael smiled, and for the first time that day, Rose felt a glimmer of hope. "Well, as it happens, I need a date for the gala too, and I think it would be wonderful to escort a beautiful, hard-working woman who my brother has underestimated for far too long." Rose's eyes widened. "But your brother—" "Let me worry about James," Michael said. "What do you say? Would you do me the honor of being my date to the gala?" Rose looked at Maria, who was grinning from ear to ear, then back at Michael. She thought about all the times James had humiliated her, all the times she had to bite her tongue to keep her job. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I would like that very much." Michael's smile grew wider. "Excellent. And don't worry about a dress. I have a friend who owns a boutique. She'll help you find something perfect." After Michael left, Maria hugged Rose tightly. "Now that's what I call karma." Rose couldn't help but laugh. For the first time in years, she was actually looking forward to one of James Morgan's parties. But as she went back to her cleaning, a small worry nagged at her. What would James do when he found out she was coming as his brother's date? And why did her heart beat a little faster when Michael smiled at her? She pushed those thoughts aside and focused on her work. Whatever happened at the gala, at least she wouldn't have to face it alone. And maybe, just maybe, James Morgan would finally learn that money couldn't buy everything, especially not the right to treat people like toys for his amusement. The boutique was unlike anything Rose had ever seen. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the dresses on display probably cost more than her yearly salary. She felt out of place just standing there. "You must be Rose," an elegant woman said, walking toward her with a warm smile. "I'm Sarah. Michael's friend, he told me all about you." "He did?" Rose asked nervously. "Oh yes, he said you needed something spectacular to wear to the gala. Something that would make his brother eat his words." Rose blushed. "I don't want to cause trouble." Sarah laughed. "Honey, from what Michael told me, his brother could use a little trouble in his life. Now let's find you the perfect dress." For the next 2 hours, Rose tried on more dresses than she had worn in her entire life. Finally, Sarah brought out a deep blue gown that made Rose gasp. "This is the one," Sarah said confidently. When Rose looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, making her look elegant and sophisticated. For the first time in years, she felt beautiful. "I can't afford this," Rose whispered, looking at the price tag. "It's already been taken care of," Sarah said with a wink. "Michael's orders." Back at the mansion, James was in an unusually good mood. Rose could hear him bragging to his business partners about the upcoming gala. "I'm even bringing my maid," she heard him say. "Shows everyone how generous I am to my employees, you know." Rose kept quiet and continued her work. Let him think he was in control. Saturday night would come soon enough. That evening, as Rose was finishing up her duties, she found an envelope on her cleaning cart. Inside was a note from Michael. "Dinner tomorrow night. We should talk about our plan for the gala." Rose's heart fluttered. She wrote back a simple yes and left it in Michael's study. The next night, Michael took her to a small Italian restaurant away from the wealthy part of town. It was cozy and warm, nothing like the fancy places James frequented. "I come here when I want to escape my brother's world," Michael explained as they sat down. Over pasta and wine, Michael told Rose about growing up with James. "He wasn't always like this," Michael said, "but money changed him, or maybe it just revealed who he really was." "Why do you stay?" Rose asked. "You could start your own company." Michael looked at her thoughtfully. "Sometimes you have to fight from the inside. James may control the company, but he doesn't control me." As they talked, Rose found herself relaxing. Michael was easy to talk to, interested in her life, her daughter, her dreams. When she mentioned her dream of opening a small bakery someday, his eyes lit up. "You bake?" Rose nodded. "My grandmother taught me, but starting a business takes money." "And well," she shrugged. "Maybe we should talk about that sometime," Michael said. After the gala was 2 days away now. Rose had her dress, her shoes, even an appointment at a salon that Sarah had arranged. Everything was ready. But that night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. What if James fired her anyway? What if she embarrassed Michael? What if this was all a huge mistake? Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Just checked the guest list. James invited every society reporter in town. He's planning something big. But don't worry, so am I." Rose stared at the message for a long time. What was James planning? And more importantly, what was Michael going to do about it? The next day, at work, James couldn't resist taking another dig at her. "I hope you found something appropriate to wear, Martinez. I wouldn't want you to feel out of place." "I found something suitable, Mr. Morgan," Rose replied calmly. Good," James said, not really listening. "Oh, and make sure you're on time. I'm planning a special announcement, and I want all my guests there to hear it." Rose nodded and went back to work, her mind racing. A special announcement. That couldn't be good. During her lunch break, she called Michael and told him about James's plans. "Don't worry," Michael said. "My brother isn't the only one with surprises planned for tomorrow night." Rose wanted to ask what he meant, but she heard James calling for her. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Rose," Michael said before she could hang up, "whatever happens tomorrow night, remember, you're not alone anymore." Those words stayed with Her for the rest of the day. She wasn't alone anymore. For the first time since she started working for James Morgan, she felt strong. Tomorrow night would change everything. She just didn't know how yet. The day of the gala arrived with a mix of excitement and dread. Rose spent the morning cleaning the mansion one last time, listening to James bark orders at the event planners. He seemed more arrogant than usual, if that was possible. "Everything has to be perfect," he kept saying. "Tonight will be a night. No one forgets." Around noon, Maria cornered Rose in the kitchen. "I heard James talking on the phone," she whispered. "He's planning to announce his engagement to that awful Victoria Sinclair." Rose's stomach dropped. Victoria Sinclair was the daughter of James's biggest business rival. She was just as cruel as James, maybe worse. Last month, she had made one of the maids cry just because the girl had accidentally wrinkled her designer blouse. "That's what the special announcement is about," Rose said, putting the pieces together. Maria nodded. "And I bet he wants you there to rub it in your face, show everyone how the help celebrates his happiness." Rose thought about Michael. Did he know about the engagement? Is that why he had been so insistent on having a plan? At 3 o'clock, Rose left work early. Another arrangement Michael had made. The salon Sarah recommended was already waiting for her. For the next few hours, Rose let herself be pampered for the first time in her life. Hair, makeup, nails, everything had to be perfect. "Michael sent this for you," the stylist said, handing her a small box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, with a single blue sapphire that matched her dress perfectly. Rose's hands trembled as she read the note, "To remind you that you're worth more than they think." By 7:30, Rose was ready. The woman in the mirror looked like she belonged in a magazine. The blue dress flowed like water, the silver necklace sparkled at her throat, and her hair was styled in elegant waves. The doorbell rang. It was Michael, looking handsome in a black tuxedo. When he saw her, his eyes widened. "Rose," he breathed. "You look absolutely beautiful." Rose blushed. "Thank you, and thank you for the necklace. I can't accept—" "Yes, you can," Michael said firmly. "It's yours, just like tonight is yours." On the drive to the mansion, Michael filled her in on some last-minute details. "James doesn't know you're coming with me. He thinks you're arriving early to help with the catering." "What about Victoria Sinclair?" Michael's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "So you heard about that?" Maria overheard him on the phone. "Victoria Sinclair is just like my brother, obsessed with money and power. They deserve each other." Michael glanced at her. "But that's not the only announcement being made tonight." Before Rose could ask what he meant, they arrived at the mansion. Cars were already lined up at the entrance, valets rushing to park expensive vehicles while photographers snapped pictures of the arriving guests. "Ready?" Michael asked, coming around to open her door. Rose took a deep breath. "Ready?" The photographers didn't recognize her at first. They were too busy taking pictures of Michael Morgan, the wealthy businessman. Then someone gasped. "Isn't that the maid?" Whispers spread through the crowd. Cameras turned toward her. Flashes went off everywhere. Michael took her arm, proud and protective. "Smile," he whispered. "You look like a queen." Inside, the mansion had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, flowers filled every corner, and waiters carried trays of champagne through the crowd. The guests stared openly as Michael led Rose through the room. She recognized many of them, people who had ignored her or looked down on her while she cleaned their messes at James's parties. "Michael!" A woman's shrill voice cut through the murmur of conversation. Victoria Sinclair approached them, wearing a tight red dress and a fake smile. "I didn't know you were bringing a date." "Victoria," Michael said coolly. "You remember Rose?" Victoria's smile turned nasty. "Of course, the maid. How charitable of you to bring her." Before either of them could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. James had arrived. Rose watched as her employer walked in, proud as a peacock in his expensive suit. Then he saw her with Michael. For a moment, his mask slipped, and pure rage flashed across his face. "Let the games begin," Michael murmured, squeezing her hand. Rose squeezed back, suddenly realizing that this night was about much more than a dress and a dance. This was war. And she was standing right in the middle of it. James Morgan stormed across the ballroom, his face red with anger. Victoria followed close behind, her expensive heels clicking against the marble floor. "What is the meaning of this?" James hissed at his brother. "Why is my maid hanging on your arm?" Michael smiled calmly. "Rose is my date for the evening. Is there a problem?" "Your date?" James laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is one of your games, isn't it? Always trying to embarrass me." "No, James, that's your specialty." Michael turned to Rose. "Would you like to dance?" The orchestra was playing a slow waltz. Rose had never danced like this before, but Michael led her gracefully across the floor. Other couples moved away, giving them space, or maybe trying, to avoid being associated with them. "Everyone's staring," Rose whispered. "Let them," Michael said. "You deserve to be seen, Rose, really seen." From the corner of her eye, Rose could see James huddled with Victoria and a group of board members. They kept glancing her way, whispering behind their hands. "What's your brother planning?" Rose asked. "He's going to announce his engagement to Victoria. It's a business merger disguised as a marriage. The Sinclair family's connections will help him take complete control of the company." "And what are you planning?" Michael spun her around slowly. "I've spent the last year gathering evidence. James has been stealing from the company, making illegal deals. Tonight, before he can make his announcement, I'm going to expose everything." Rose missed a step. "That's why you brought me here?" "No," Michael said softly. "I brought you here because I've watched you for months. Your kindness, your strength, your dignity in the face of my brother's cruelty. I admire you, Rose. More than, you know." Before Rose could respond, James clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. The music stopped. "Friends, family, honored guests," James boomed, "I have an announcement to make. But first, I see many of you have noticed my maid is here tonight, dressed up like she belongs among us." The crowd tittered. Rose felt her face. "Vern, I invited her here because I believe in charity," James continued. "And what better charity than showing someone like her how the other half lives, even if it's just for one night." Victoria laughed loudly, encouraging others to join in. Some did, though many looked uncomfortable. But now, to the real reason. "We're here," James raised his glass. "Victoria and I—" "Actually," Michael cut in, his voice carrying across the room, "I have an announcement of my own." James's face darkened. "This isn't the time, brother." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time." Michael pulled out his phone. "I just sent every board member here proof of your embezzlement. The offshore accounts, the fake contracts, everything." The room erupted in murmurs. Board members pulled out their phones, their faces growing serious as they read. "You're lying," James sputtered. "The SEC will be very interested in these documents," Michael continued. "As will the press. I believe there are several reporters here tonight." Victoria backed away from James like he had a disease. "What is he talking about, darling?" "He's trying to ruin me," James growled. He lunged at Michael, but security guards appeared out of nowhere, holding him back. "You're ruining yourself," Michael said. "The board is calling an emergency meeting right now. You're done, James." Rose watched as James's perfect world crumbled around him. Board members huddled in corners, reporters furiously took notes, and Victoria Sinclair quietly slipped out a side door. "You planned all this," Rose said to Michael. "The dress, the necklace, making sure I was here to see it." "I planned to expose James," Michael admitted. "But everything else, the dress, the necklace, asking you to be my date, that was because I wanted to. Because you deserve to be treated with respect." James broke free from the security guards and stumbled toward them. "You think this changes anything?" he slurred. "You're still just a maid, a nobody." "No," Rose said, finding her voice at last. "I'm someone who worked hard every day while you looked down on me. Someone who kept her dignity while you tried to take it away. I may be a maid, but I'm not a nobody. I never was." Security escorted James from his own party, while reporters swarmed around, snapping pictures of his downfall. The guests whispered and pointed, enjoying the drama of a powerful man's destruction. "I think we should leave," Michael said softly to Rose. "The board will handle things from here." Outside, the night air was cool on Rose's skin. Michael draped, his jacket over her shoulders as they waited for the valet to bring his car. "What happens now?" Rose asked. "James will probably face criminal charges. The company will need new leadership." Michael helped her into the car. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight I want to take you somewhere special." He drove them to the small Italian restaurant where they'd had dinner before. It was closed, but the owner was waiting for them. "Antonio is an old friend," Michael explained as they walked in. The restaurant was empty except for a single table set with candles and flowers. "You planned this too?" "I hoped we'd have something to celebrate." They sat down and Antonio brought them wine and his famous tiramisu. For a while they just talked. About the party, about James, about the future. "I meant what I said about your bakery," Michael said suddenly. "I've seen how Maria's face lights up when she talks about your cakes." "You have a gift." Rose shook her head. "That's just a dream. It doesn't have to be." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. "The company owns several empty storefronts downtown. One of them would make a perfect bakery." "Michael?" "I can't." "Yes, you can. You've spent years taking care of other people's homes, other people's lives. It's time for you to build something of your own." Rose felt tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because I've fallen in love with you," Michael said simply. "Your strength, your grace, the way you never let James break your spirit. I've been falling for months, watching you from afar, wondering if I'd ever have the courage to tell you." Before Rose could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria. "Turn on the news, now." Antonio brought out a small TV and turned it on. James's face filled the screen. He was being led away in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions. "Sources say the evidence against James Morgan is overwhelming," the news anchor reported. "The SEC has frozen all company assets pending investigation." In a surprising twist, the board has called an emergency meeting to name Michael Morgan as interim CEO. Rose turned to Michael. "Did you know about this?" "I knew it was a possibility, but that's not why I did this. I did it because it was right. And us. Was that right too?" Michael stood up and pulled Rose to her feet. In the candlelight, his eyes were full of emotion. "This, you and me, is the most right thing I've ever felt." He pulled her close and kissed her softly. Rose felt like her heart might burst. All those romance novels she used to read, all those fairy tales about poor girls and rich princes, none of them had prepared her for this moment, but their happiness was about to be tested. Outside the restaurant, Victoria Sinclair watched. Through the window, her face twisted with rage. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "It's me," she said when someone answered. "You were right about Michael Morgan. He ruined everything. Yes, I'll help you get revenge. After all, James, you're still my fiancé, handcuffs or not." Inside the restaurant, Rose and Michael were lost in their own world, unaware of the storm gathering around them. For now, they had this moment. A candle-lit table, the taste of wine and tiramisu, and the promise of tomorrow. But tomorrow would bring its own challenges. James might be in jail, but he still had friends in high places. Victoria wasn't going to disappear quietly. And Rose would soon learn that stepping into Michael's world meant dealing with people who would never accept a former maid as his equal. Yet somehow, none of that seemed to matter right now. Not with Michael's arms around her, not with the memory of how he had stood up for her, not with the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. The morning newspapers all carried the same headline: Morgan Empire in Chaos. Rose read the stories while having coffee in Michael's penthouse, still wearing her blue gala dress from the night before. "The board meeting is in an hour," Michael said, adjusting his tie. "Will you be okay here?" "I should go home, change. Clothes, get ready for work." Michael sat beside her. "Rose, you don't have to work as a maid anymore." "Yes, I do." She touched his hand. "I won't let people say I'm taking advantage of you. Besides, I need to save money for the bakery." Michael smiled and kissed her forehead. "That's one of the things I love about you. Your pride." After Michael left, Rose called her daughter Amy at college. "Mum, you're all over the internet." "Amy," exclaimed, "the videos of you telling off James Morgan are everywhere." Rose groaned. She hadn't thought about social media. Now everyone would know her story. When she got to work, the mansion was in chaos. Police were carrying away boxes of documents. Maria hugged her tight. "You're still here," Maria said. "I thought you'd be off living the high life with Michael by now." "I'm still me," Rose said. "Just because I kissed a millionaire doesn't mean I stopped being a worker." But things had changed. The other maids whispered behind her back. Some were jealous, others suspicious. By lunchtime, Rose heard them calling her the gold digger when they thought she couldn't hear. Victoria Sinclair showed up around noon, demanding to collect her things from James's room. When she saw Rose, her eyes narrowed. "Enjoying your moment." "In the spotlight," Victoria sneered. "Don't get too comfortable. Women like you don't last long in our world." "I'm not in your world," Rose replied. "I'm just doing my job," Victoria laughed. "For now. But trust me, this fairy tale won't have a happy ending." That afternoon, Rose found her cleaning supplies dumped in the trash. A note was pinned to her locker. "Gold digging witch." She cleaned up the mess quietly, refusing to let them see her cry. At the board meeting, Michael was officially named CEO. When he returned to the mansion that evening, he found Rose scrubbing floors. "What are you doing?" he asked, helping her up. "My job." "Rose, please, let me take care of you." "That's what I'm afraid of," she admitted. "I don't want to be taken care of. I want to be your equal." Michael pulled her close. "You already are, but I understand. We'll do this your way." That night they had dinner at Rose's small apartment. Michael didn't complain about the mismatched plates or the cramped kitchen. Instead, he helped her bake cookies and talked about plans for her bakery. But while they played house, Victoria was meeting with James in jail. "Everything's arranged," she told him. "Your lawyers found a loophole in the company bylaws. If we can prove Michael is emotionally unstable, say dating an employee and making risky business decisions, we can force a vote of no confidence." James smiled coldly. "And you have proof?" Victoria pulled out her phone, showing him photos of Michael and Rose at the restaurant. "I had them followed. He's already promising her a store, talking about making her a partner. The board won't like that." "What about the evidence against me?" "Leave that to me. I still have friends at the SEC. Amazing what a few well-placed bribes can do." Meanwhile, Rose and Michael sat on her small balcony, sharing dreams and cookies, unaware of the plans being made against them. "I want to do this right," Michael said. "No shortcuts, no favors. We'll get a loan for your bakery just like anyone else would." Rose leaned against him. "People will talk. Let them. We know the truth." But the truth was about to become very complicated. Because at that moment, Victoria was putting her plan into action. She'd hired someone to dig into Rose's past, looking for anything that could destroy her reputation. And they'd found something. Something Rose had never told anyone, not even Michael. Something that could ruin everything they were building together. Victoria sat in her luxury apartment, reading the private investigator's report with a satisfied smile. The secrets of Rose's past were laid out in black and white. "It's worse than we hoped," she told James over the prison phone. 15 years ago, Rose Martinez was arrested for theft. She worked for the Henderson family, and Mrs. Henderson's diamond necklace went missing. "Was she convicted?" James asked eagerly. "No. The charges were dropped. But here's the interesting part. She was dating Mrs. Henderson's son at the time. Just like now, she got close to a rich man. And just like now, valuable things started disappearing. Rose had no idea her past was being dug up. She was busy looking at small storefronts with Michael, planning her bakery. They found a perfect spot. A corner building with big windows and a small apartment upstairs. "We could live here," Michael suggested, "above the bakery." Rose's heart skipped. "We? Only if you want to." He pulled her close. "I know it's fast, but when something's right, you just know." That evening they had dinner with Amy, Rose's daughter, who was home from college for the weekend. Amy watched Michael with suspicious eyes. "So you're really serious about my mum?" Amy asked bluntly. "Amy!" Rose scolded. "It's okay," Michael said. "Yes, I'm serious. I love your mother." Amy nodded slowly. "Good, because she deserves someone who sees how amazing she is." The next day, everything fell apart. Rose was at work when Victoria walked into the mansion, followed by 2 police officers and a woman Rose hadn't seen in 15 years, Mrs. Henderson. "That's her," Mrs. Henderson said, pointing at Rose. "She stole my grandmother's necklace and now she's doing it again," The police officers stepped forward. "Mrs. Martinez, we need to ask you some questions about missing jewelry reported by Ms. Sinclair." Rose's hands shook. "What jewelry?" Victoria pulled out her phone, showing pictures of an expensive diamond bracelet. "This was in James's safe. It disappeared right after you started dating Michael. Funny coincidence, isn't it?" "I never touched that bracelet," Rose said, but she could see the doubt in everyone's eyes. The police took her statement. Word spread quickly through the mansion. By afternoon, everyone was whispering about Rose's arrest record, about the old theft charges, about her pattern of getting close to wealthy men. Michael rushed home when he heard. He found Rose sitting in the kitchen, crying while Maria tried to comfort her. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. "I was ashamed," Rose whispered. "I didn't steal that necklace, but nobody believed me. Richard, Mrs. Henderson's son, he gave me the necklace as a gift, but when his mother found out about us, she accused me of stealing it. And now Victoria's bracelet. I never went near James's safe. You know that." Michael pulled her into his arms. "I believe you, but the board is worried. They're calling an emergency meeting tomorrow." "To fire you?" "They're concerned about my judgment. Dating an employee with a criminal record. Former charges that were dropped," Rose corrected fiercely. "I know, but Victoria and James are playing this perfectly. They're making me look unstable, making you look like a gold digger who targets wealthy men." Rose pulled away from him. "Maybe we should stop seeing each other, just until things calm down." "No." Michael's voice was firm. "That's what they want. They're trying to break us apart, because together we're stronger than they are." But Rose could see the worry in his eyes. His whole life's work was at risk because of her, because of a mistake from 15 years ago that wouldn't stay buried. That night, she couldn't sleep. Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow at noon. I know who really took Victoria's bracelet. Come alone or hell, take this information to the police." Rose stared at the message for a long time. It could be a trap, but if someone really knew the truth, she had to take the chance. She didn't tell Michael about the message. She didn't tell anyone. Some secrets were too dangerous to share, even with the people you loved. The meeting place was an old diner on the edge of town. Rose arrived exactly at noon, her heart pounding. The only customer was a young woman sitting in a back booth. "Mrs. Martinez." The woman waved her over. "I'm Jenny. I used to work for Victoria Sinclair." Rose sat down cautiously. "You know something about the bracelet?" "I know everything." Jenny glanced around nervously. "Victoria asked me to plant it in your locker last week, but I couldn't do it. I quit instead." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Victoria ruined my life too. She accused me of stealing when I caught her having an affair with James while he was still in jail. She blackmailed me into silence." Jenny pulled out her phone. "I recorded her talking about the plan. She and James set this whole thing up to destroy you and Michael." Rose's hands shook as she listened to the recording. Victoria's voice was clear. "Plant the bracelet in her locker. Once she's arrested, Michael will have no choice but to distance himself from her. The board will remove him and James will be back in control." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Victoria knows things about me, bad things." Jenny's eyes filled with tears. "But I couldn't let her destroy another innocent person." Back at the mansion, Michael was fighting for his job. The board members sat in James's old office, their faces stern. "This relationship with the maid shows poor judgment," one said. "And these theft allegations that suddenly appeared after my brother's arrest," Michael countered. "Don't you see what's happening?" Victoria burst into the room. "I just got robbed. Someone broke into my apartment and stole evidence about Rose's criminal past." Michael stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "Documents proving she stole from other employers. They're gone." Victoria's performance was perfect. Tears, trembling hands, everything. But she had made one mistake. Because at that moment Rose walked in with Jenny. "Looking for this?" Rose held up her phone with the recording. Victoria's face went white. "Jenny, what are you doing here?" "Telling the truth." Jenny stepped forward. "About the bracelet, about James, about everything." The board members listened to the recording in shocked silence. Victoria tried to deny it, but her own words condemned her. Call security, Michael ordered, and someone get the police on the phone. Victoria backed away. You can't prove anything. It's my word against some low-class maid and a disgruntled employee. Actually, said a new voice, you're wrong about that. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Henderson in the doorway. The woman who had accused Rose 15 years ago now looked ashamed. I came to confess, she said quietly. Rose never stole my necklace. My son Richard gave it to her. I knew that, but I couldn't accept my son dating someone from her background. So I lied. I've regretted it every day since. Victoria screamed in frustration and tried to run, but security caught her at the door. Within an hour, she was in police custody, and James was facing new charges for conspiracy. The board members apologized to Michael and Rose. They voted unanimously to keep Michael as CEO and even approved a small business loan for Rose's bakery. Later that night, Rose and Michael stood in the empty storefront that would become her bakery. Moonlight streamed through the big windows, making everything look magical. I can't believe it's really over, Rose said. Michael pulled her close. Not over, just beginning. But they were wrong. Because in her jail cell, Victoria was writing a letter to someone from her past. Someone who hated the Morgan family even more than she did. Dear Uncle Robert, she wrote, I need your help. It's time for the Morgan empire to fall once and for all. Robert Sinclair stepped out of his private jet, his cold eyes scanning the city skyline. At 65, he was one of the most feared businessmen in the country, and now his niece Victoria needed him. Uncle Robert, Victoria rushed to hug him, out on bail. She looked thinner, desperate. Thank you for coming. The Morgans have always been our enemies, Robert said. Tell me everything. Meanwhile, Rose's bakery was taking shape. The walls were painted a warm yellow and the display cases were being installed. Michael had kept his word. Everything was done properly with a real business loan and proper permits. What will you call it? Amy asked, helping her mother arrange the kitchen equipment. Sweet dreams, Rose said, because that's what this is, a dream coming true. The grand opening was set for next week. Rose had already hired 2 assistants, and Maria had quit her job at the mansion to become her business partner. But their happiness was about to be tested. Robert Sinclair was a man who believed in destroying his enemies completely. The bakery's health permits, he told Victoria in his hotel suite. My friend at the health department will revoke them the day before the opening. Victoria smiled. And the business loan? I've bought it from the bank. 1 missed payment and we take everything. What about Michael? Robert's eyes turned cold. Leave Michael Morgan to me. The next day, Michael received a call from the board. An old business rival was attempting a hostile takeover, buying up shares at an alarming rate. It's Robert Sinclair, one board member warned. He's ruthless. He once destroyed an entire company, just because their CEO refused to invite him to a charity gala. Michael rushed to the bakery to find Rose in tears. The health inspector had just left after finding violations that would delay the opening. This isn't a coincidence, Michael said, holding her. Robert Sinclair is Victoria's uncle. He's trying to destroy us both. Can he do that? He can try. That night, Robert invited Michael to dinner. The restaurant was empty except for them. Leave Rose Martinez, Robert said without preamble. End this ridiculous romance, and I'll let you keep your company. Michael's grip tightened on his water. Glass? Why do you care who I date? The Morgans have always looked down on us. Your father cheated my sister out of her inheritance. Now you're letting a maid infiltrate your world? It's an insult. Rose is worth 10 of you. Robert smiled coldly. Then you'll lose everything. The company, the bakery, everything you love, I'll destroy it all. You can try. Back at the bakery, Rose was doing the books when she found something strange. The loan payments had doubled. Without explanation. She called the bank only to discover Robert Sinclair now owned her loan. Michael, she said when he returned, maybe we should end this. I can't let you lose your company because of me. That's exactly what they want. Michael pulled out his phone and made a call. Get me everything you can find on Robert Sinclair. Every deal, every transaction, every skeleton in his closet. Rose watched him with worry. What are you planning? If Robert Sinclair wants war, I'll give him one. But this time, we fight together. Outside the bakery, Victoria watched them through the window. She pulled out her phone and called her uncle. "They're not backing down," she reported. "Good," Robert replied. "That will make destroying them so much more satisfying." But Robert had underestimated one thing: the power of love against greed. Because while he plotted in his luxury hotel suite, Rose and Michael were gathering allies. Maria, Jenny, even Mrs. Henderson, everyone who had witnessed the truth, was ready to stand with them. The real battle was about to begin. The morning of Sweet Dreams Bakery's opening dawned bright and clear. Despite Robert Sinclair's threats, Rose stood proud behind the counter. The display cases were filled with her best creations, cakes, pastries, and cookies that would make any professional baker proud. But the store was empty. No customers came. "He's threatened everyone," Maria said, watching the empty street. "The other shop owners told me Robert Sinclair's people warned them not to do business with us." Michael arrived, looking grim. "The board meeting's in an hour. Sinclair has bought 40% of the company shares. He only needs a little more to take control." Rose touched his arm. "Go. Fight for your company. I'll handle things here." As Michael left, a black car pulled up outside. Robert Sinclair stepped out, followed by Victoria. "Charming little shop," Robert said, looking around with contempt. "Shame no one will ever eat here." "You can't scare everyone forever," Rose replied. "No," Robert smiled. "I already own your loan. One missed payment, and this place is mine. And trust me, with no customers, you will miss a payment." Victoria wandered over to the display case. "Such pretty cakes. It's almost sad no one will taste them." Just then, the bell over the door chimed. Mrs. Henderson walked in, followed by several well-dressed women. "Actually," Mrs. Henderson said, "we're here to taste everything and to place orders for the charity gala next week." More people started arriving. First a trickle, then a steady stream. Rose recognized many of them from the mansion, from the parties where she had worked as a maid. "What is this?" Robert demanded. "This," said a voice from the door, "is karma." Michael stood there with Jenny and a group of board members. "You see, Robert," Michael continued, "while you were busy threatening small business owners, we were gathering evidence. Jenny here kept very detailed records of your illegal activities when she worked for Victoria." Jenny held up a thick folder, "including proof that you bribed health inspectors and threatened people to stay away from this bakery." "The board has voted," one of the members said. "We're blocking your takeover attempt and we're reporting your activities to the SEC." Victoria grabbed her uncle's arm. "Do something." But Robert's face had gone pale. He knew when he was beaten. "This isn't over," he snarled, backing toward the door. "What the—" "Actually, it is," said another voice. A police officer stepped into the bakery. "Robert Sinclair, Victoria Sinclair, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and criminal harassment." As they were led away in handcuffs, Victoria looked back at Rose. "How? How did you beat us?" Rose smiled. "Because I had something you never understood. People who believed in me. Real love, not greed." The bakery was packed now. Every table was full and there was a line out the door. Rose's phone buzzed with a message from Amy. "Mom, you're trending on social media. Everyone's sharing pictures of your cakes." That evening, after the last customer left, Rose and Michael sat in the empty bakery. The sunset painted the walls golden, and the air was sweet with the smell of sugar and success. "Marry me," Michael said suddenly. Rose looked at him in surprise. "What?" "I was going to plan something elaborate, but after everything we've been through, I just want to ask you right here, right now. Marry me, Rose Martinez. Be my partner in everything." Rose looked around at her bakery, at the dream she had built with hard work and love. She thought about the long journey from being a maid to being a business owner, about the man who had seen her worth when others only saw her uniform. "Yes," she said, tears in her eyes. "Yes, I'll marry you." Michael pulled her close and kissed her. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Maria found them like that an hour later when she came back to do the final cleaning. "So," she said with a knowing smile, "should I start planning a wedding cake?" Rose laughed, her heart full of joy. From her uniform pocket, she pulled out the key to the bakery, her key to her dream, her future. "First," she said, Let's make this the best bakery in town. Then we'll talk about wedding cakes. Michael squeezed her hand. We have all the time in the world. And they did. Because sometimes fairy tales do come true, even for maids who dare to dream big. Sometimes love really does conquer all. And sometimes, the sweetest victories are the ones you have to fight for. Sweet Dreams Bakery became famous not just for its cakes, but for its story. People came from all over to taste Rose's creations and to see the place where a maid became a business owner, where love triumphed over greed, where dreams, with enough courage and the right partner, really did come true.